Tonight on Ukraine Today, Russian strike. The occupiers hit Dnipro with missiles. At least 4 people were killed, dozens were injured. The battlefield, from the successes of Ukraine's defense forces in the Dnipropetrovsk region to the enemy's advance in the Donetsk region. A tough conversation. A meeting between Ukrainian and US representatives took place in Florida. Is there any hope for a just peace? Money for widening aggression. Putin signed a budget for 2026. How much goes to the army and the security bloc? All this and more right now. Hi there, I'm Volodymyr Robchun and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, hit like and let's get to the news. We start with a strike by Russian terrorists on Dnipro. Missiles hit the city. At least 4 people were killed, dozens were injured. Apartment buildings, office spaces, an educational facility and 49 cars were damaged. Russian occupiers are preparing an ecological disaster in Kherson with consequences for the EU. Ukrainian intelligence obtained secret documents showing that Russia is developing a plan to strike chemical warehouses and port infrastructure in the Kherson region near the Dnipro River. This could cause toxic substances to leak into the Black Sea and spread by sea currents toward the coasts of Romania, Bulgaria and Turkey. Ukrainian troops are testing new weapons to counter Russian glide bombs. From September to November, defense forces destroyed up to 100 of these bombs. Details are not being disclosed yet. The defense forces liberated the village of Ivanivka in the Dnipropetrovsk region. That's according to the deep state. 53 occupiers were eliminated. 19 were taken prisoner. Meanwhile, Russian troops advanced near Mirnograd in the Donetsk region. More on the situation at the front in our story.
Greed that doomed the Russian occupiers. Near Berdyansk, during a special operation, Chechen Kadyrovites were sent to the afterlife, reports the main intelligence directorate. Ukrainian partisans discovered that the valiant marauders of Don had set up a scheme to sell the fuel they themselves had stolen. The bearded men were selling diesel at the same spot on the highway near Berdyansk. In the end, that very spot became their mass grave. As a result of targeted strikes by the main intelligence directorate, 2 vehicles used by the Akhmat fighters were successfully destroyed. This weekend, Putin also lost 2 tankers from his shadow fleet, which are under sanctions for being involved in transporting Russian oil. These were attacked in the Black Sea by Ukrainian Sea baby drones.
The Ukrainian drones encountered the Kairos tanker and the Veret, if I'm not mistaken. The incident occurred near the coast of Turkey, but in neutral waters, so there can be no claims against us. How did it happen? It is reported that these were SBU drones, according to sources. But these sources apparently are not ordinary ones, but very special, because they also leaked the video. And this attack on Russian, well, de facto, not de jure, but de facto, Russian tankers will have simply incredible consequences. We have finally decided to impose our own sanctions on this issue. So we are attacking not only Novorossiysk, not only Tuapse, but also accordingly these tankers that are transporting oil. Well, or these in particular are not transporting now, but used to transport.
Russians will find no peace, neither at sea nor on land. In fact, the armed forces of Ukraine are giving the occupiers no respite on any section of the front without exception. Ukrainian border guards shared a video report of the work they have done. Their drone operators destroyed enemy shelters, communication equipment and UAV control antennas in the northern Slobozansky direction. As a result, the enemy in this area has effectively lost its eyes and ears and is temporarily unable to conduct full-scale combat operations. The situation is not much better for the enemy in their own rear either. There, in the vicinity of the village of Mokra Orlovka in the Belgorod region, our MiG-29 fighter from the Ghost of Kiev unit carried out precision strikes on the occupiers' command post. The Kremlin does not admit which of the Russian generals was hit by the Ukrainian fighter. However, Ukrainian intelligence hints that as a result of the raid, the Russian army may have lost several high-ranking military officials at once. Nevertheless, the Russian army continues to put on a brave face despite the unfavorable situation. And it is desperately trying to prove to the whole world, and apparently to Putin first and foremost, that the so-called special military operation declared by Moscow is going according to plan. So following the old tradition, Russian flag bearers tried to raise their tricolor over the building in Vovchansk, as if to say the settlement is already under the control of the occupiers. But there was a hitch. A Ukrainian drone disagreed with them.
It's like we're sending a message to Vladimir Putin, and not just to him, that all his stories about everything going according to plan, and that he's in a state of permanent calm and nothing affects him, well, his assessment of the situation is a bit, let's say, off.
And here are unique shots from a Ukrainian unmanned ground vehicle. Equipped with an M2 Browning machine gun, it encountered Russian armored vehicles in the middle of the night on the road. Russian armored vehicles. For the occupiers, the encounter was a complete surprise, and for the crew of the MTLB and the armored vehicle itself, it was their last combat mission. They were left not only without equipment, but also without the means to deliver it. Even in the rear, Russian occupiers can only dream of peace. And all this is thanks to the concerned partisans. Recently, they carried out a successful sabotage operation in Bryansk, delivering a precise strike against enemy railway logistics. As a result, the electric locomotive used by the Russian army to transport military cargo was turned into a pile of scrap metal, creating significant supply problems for the occupying front and disrupting the schedule of ammunition train movements, as well as equipment and fuel that were being prepared for dispatch to the front line in the Sumy direction. Overall, in the past 24 hours, the Russians have lost at least 5 tanks, 7 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launchers, as well as another 1,000 soldiers.
Russians, a big hello to you.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. Now's the time to subscribe, like this video and share it. Thank you. And glory to Ukraine. Special forces of Ukraine military intelligence blew up Kadyrov's fighters who were selling stolen fuel near Berdyansk. 2 vehicles used by occupiers from the Akhmat unit were successfully destroyed. In the past 24 hours, Russia lost at least 1,060 troops killed and wounded. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, that's already 1,173,920 invaders. In addition, over the last day, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 6 armored fighting vehicles, 14 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy equipment. The Netherlands is allocating 250 million euros for weapons for Ukraine. Under the Pearl initiative, the funds will go toward boosting air defense and ammunition for the F-16. That's according to Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans. Also, the European Union will allocate 20 million euros this year to strengthen Moldova's air defense. EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas, said the decision was made because Russian drones violated Moldova's airspace. According to Kallas, this is unacceptable and threatens civilian air traffic. Ukraine and Norway will jointly produce Ukrainian drones. The defense ministries of both countries signed the necessary documents. The idea is simple. Kyiv shares its experience and innovations and receives a production platform in return. Now to Florida. A meeting between Ukrainian and US representatives took place there. They discussed ways to end Russia's war. CNN writes the talks were tough but constructive. The head of the Ukrainian delegation reported to the president about closer positions with the American side. Deputy Foreign Minister Serhiy Kyslytsya called the meeting very substantive. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the negotiations were productive, though the teams still have work to do. Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff described this conversation with the Ukrainian side as positive and confirmed he is heading to Moscow for a meeting with Putin. By the way, it's expected tomorrow. Meanwhile, Ukraine has synchronized sanctions with the United States and imposed restrictions against Rosneft, its enterprises, and companies within the Lukoil group. President Zelensky says these measures are already noticeably depriving Russia's war machine of money. And what's happening in Russia? Well, looks like they are gearing up to expand their aggression. Putin signed the 2026 budget. 40% of all spending goes to the army and the security bloc. Where's the money coming from, you may ask? Official revenues, shadow income, and increased financial pressure on ordinary Russians. VAT is going up to 22%.
A third of the budget goes to war, and record amounts are allocated to the military sector since the days of the USSR. Putin has signed Russia's budget for the next year, 2026.
The government will have to finance the amendments proposed by the president.
And he couldn't propose anything except tightening belts and increasing military spending. So according to the document, about 30% of the budget is planned to be spent on the military, which is almost 13 trillion rubles. As the Moscow Times notes, this hasn't happened since the Soviet era. Also, just under 4 trillion is allocated to the National Security section, which funds the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Guard, Special Services, and the penitentiary system. All of these agencies, to one degree or another, are also involved in the war against Ukraine. According to experts, the budget simply cannot withstand such a burden.
All these statistics really strongly remind me of the late Soviet period, when they tried to improve the overall picture for GDP or inflation by focusing on some single attractive indicator. Well, in short, you get the idea. In reality, it's all nonsense. Inflation is high, GDP is flat, and apparently in the fourth quarter, it'll even be negative. All the official numbers they give are, well, not exactly completely made up, but they do try to make them look better by highlighting some separate positive indicator.
But you can already count the good indicators in Russia on the fingers of one hand, and by 2026 there will be even fewer. After all, those record sums for the war have to come from somewhere. So, the share of social spending in the Russian budget will drop next year from the pre-war 38% to 25%. Spending on economic support will fall from 17.5% to less than 11%. In both cases, these are the lowest figures in the past 20 years.
Let me remind you that starting January 1st, the value-added tax in Russia will increase from 20 to 22%. The transport tax and environmental levy will also rise significantly. And right now they are developing some completely new types of levies there. That is, I joke that soon they'll be charging for air because really they need the money to cover the budget deficit.
And 2026 hasn't even arrived yet, but according to the official forecasts of Putin's economists, the deficit is already guaranteed. After all, the country expects to earn just over 40 trillion rubles, but plans to spend more than 44 trillion. The difference, just for a second, is $166 billion.
Of course, they need to explain that the high inflation we're seeing today, and in reality it's not going anywhere, inflation remains high. They need to explain that this is supposedly caused by some temporary factors. They need to explain that, as it were, our overall numbers look good.
At the same time, some indicators are lagging behind tremendously. For example, the regional budget deficit is projected to be around 800 billion rubles, while aid from the Kremlin is set at only 30 billion.
This means that regional budgets will have to make very serious cuts to their items, their expense items, yes. And what can they cut? Once again, payments to contract soldiers, since this is a very large part, a very large share of the regional budget's expenses. Well, after that, they'll have to cut social spending, social programs, spending on repairs and maintenance of public utilities, and so on.
At the same time, experts note that the Russian budget was drafted over several months, and the risks factored in were only up to the beginning of autumn at most. But Trump, with his sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil, created enormous problems for Russia at the end of the year.
As for the major Russian oil companies, Lukoil and Rosneft, of course, the overall situation is quite complicated for Russia, primarily because these two significant companies collectively represent approximately 50% of the nation's total oil and gas exports.
But despite all the obvious factors, officially everything is fine in Russia because they try to shift the deficit onto the regions. In Moscow and St. Petersburg, as always, everything is fine, which means they can once again write a new report about economic growth.
Here's an interesting point, for example, about GDP, right? So they could very well show the real picture that GDP has been basically at zero for the second or third quarter already. But they still draw in something like 0.6, just so they can say, like, no, we're not in a recession yet.
Notably, according to analysts, 2026, with its initially unrealistic figures, might finally push the common people to take to the streets. And this concerns first and foremost the residents of Russia's remote regions.
All the wealth of natural resources that the Russian Federation possesses as a state is no longer in Moscow. And in fact, the main wealth isn't even in the European part of Russia, but beyond the Urals. And these peoples, these parts of the Federation will inevitably start asking the question, why should we keep feeding Moscow, which lives in luxury, maybe also St. Petersburg and a few other very large cities, while we ourselves live in poverty?
Moreover, one of the most important factors fueling discontent will be the new taxation of small businesses. Analysts believe that more than half of private enterprises will simply be strangled by the increased duties. Or perhaps their owners will strangle those who came up with this idea.
Polish President Karol Nawrocki cancelled his meeting with Hungarian Prime Minister Orban after Orban's trip to Putin. The Polish leader decided to limit his visit to Hungary to only the Visegrad Group summit. Finally, the fate of pro-Putin entertainers, using singer Larisa Dolina as an example. These days, she is known less for her stage career and more for the fraudulent schemes. Here are the details.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Connections in the Kremlin have ruined the pro-Putin artist Larisa Dolina. She is being massively cancelled. The name of the popular artist is now closely associated with fraudulent schemes and deception.
The Dolina effect is a phenomenon caused by the spread of a scheme in which the seller of an apartment shortly after the sale tries to challenge the deal, claiming to have been the victim of fraudsters and to have lost the money from the sale.
It all started after the pro-Z artist, having been deceived by scammers, used her government connections to take it out on the buyer.
The day before, the Cassation Court upheld the decision on the complaint filed by the apartment buyer Polina Luri. Larisa Dolina was given back the apartment she had sold on the advice of scammers, and it was stated that the singer does not have to return the money to the buyer, since Luri is capable of suing the scammers herself for compensation.
After the decision of the Russian injustice system to leave an innocent woman without money and an apartment, both companies and listeners began to cancel Larisa Dolina.
Friends, we have made an important decision. Larisa Dolina's house in Moscow has been temporarily excluded from our delivery zone. Until the buyer's money is fully returned, our juicy whoppers and crispy fries will not be delivered there. People's artist of Russia, Larisa Dolina, may be cut from the musical film The Incredible Adventures of Shurik. As Abzats has learned, the reason is the negativity surrounding the people's artist's name due to the apartment scandal.
Did you know that a Dolina wall has appeared in Moscow? After this high-profile case, Muscovites have a new urban legend. Buyers of real estate on the secondary market bring various souvenirs, toys, locks and candles to Dolina's house. But the most interesting thing is that they bring slippers. Slippers are a symbol of home comfort. According to legend, if you bring them to Dolina's house before buying an apartment, the deal will go well. The seller won't fall under the influence of scammers and later won't demand the apartment back. People also leave notes. Let's carefully see what's there. Old lady, don't be fooled by a two-room apartment. Old lady, don't be fooled by a two-room apartment. Let's hope that Dolina's wall really does help honest buyers. Well, I'll light the candles. May everyone's deals go through without returns or lawsuits.
Right now, Larisa Dolina is taking over the trends in Russian social media. Hundreds of Russians to one of the singer's songs are demanding refunds for various purchases and trips because they were under the influence of scammers. In addition to hundreds of thousands of listeners, Dolina is now facing backlash from her colleagues in the industry as well. According to them, the singer's underhanded actions have cast a shadow over all Russian artists, making it nearly impossible for them to sell their own apartments.
Because of one so-called favorite singer of mine, Larisa Alexandrovna Dolina, I can't sell any of my apartments right now. I want to help my children with a home. And I myself have long wanted to renovate my house, and I'm also doing repairs for my sister. And now, thanks to this singer whom I can't stand. And now, just because of this whole situation, I have to go through all these addiction clinics, go somewhere. I don't even know why. It's all just incomprehensible. If the buyer finds out that I'm an artist, then apparently I might try to scam someone.
There were also those who came to the defense of the singer swindler. Just like Dolina herself, these are artists who serve Putin. Grigory Leps, Valeria and Yosif Prigozhin believe that the singer did the right thing regarding the apartment issue. And as an argument in Dolina's favor, they cite her support for the war started by Putin.
One could say it's some kind of conspiracy, a special campaign directed at her. Dolina found herself in the role of a sinner whom people want to stone. I don't want to be among those who throw stones at her. That's not Christian. Everyone is rejoicing now, mocking her, but Dolina is a patriot. She has lived for 70 years, performed on the front lines for free.
Pro-Putin artists are simply convinced. Support for the war and serving the Kremlin's interests grants them indulgence in any disputes and conflicts with ordinary mortal Russians.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment and share. See you next time.